Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Peter for this invitation to tell firsthand accounts of what can happen. But also, I'd like to thank you for your bravery, for taking on this issue and being willing to confront the psychiatric drug epidemic. Unfortunately, this is more than just a debate over the validity of scientific evidence. As you've heard, there are real life and death consequences to the issues being discussed here today. 12 years ago, my life looked very different than it does today. I was married to my best friend, had a successful career in advertising, and was planning to have a family. However, all of that changed with one phone call. On August 6, 2003, I became a widow. Woody, my husband of almost 10 years, was found hanging from the rafters of our garage, dead at age 37. Woody wasn't depressed, nor did he have a history of depression or any other mental illness. Woody was outgoing, gregarious, smart, had a huge personality. Everyone loved him. He had just started his dream job as vice president of sales with a startup company selling energy-efficient lighting 2 months prior and starting having difficulty sleeping, which is not uncommon for entrepreneurs. So Woody went to his family doctor and was given Zoloft, off-label for insomnia. The doctor said Zoloft would help take the edge off and help him sleep. 5 weeks later, Woody was dead. The 3-week Pfizer-supplied sample pack that Woody came home with automatically doubled the dose, unbeknownst to him, from 25 to 50 milligrams after week 1. No cautionary warning was given to him or me about the need to be closely monitored when first going on the drug or dosages changing. In fact, I was out of the country for the first 3 weeks he was on this drug. Within days, Woody started experiencing all the side effects like profuse night sweats, diarrhea, worsened insomnia. He also experienced other side effects that Pfizer knew, akathisia, but did not warn Woody or his doctor or even his family. Shortly before he died, I found Woody curled up on our kitchen floor with his hands around his head like a vice and going, "Kim, you gotta help me. I don't know what's happened to me." It's like my head's out to my body looking in, "Kim, help me." Little did I know what that meant. We calmed him down. He called his doctor the next day and said, "You got to give it 4 to 6 weeks to kick in." 5 weeks, he made it. From the beginning, Woody's death did not make any sense to anyone who knew him. Everywhere I turned, the so-called experts and suicide support groups were telling me Woody must have been depressed. But in the deepest part of me, I knew something did not add up. Why would a guy who loved life take his own life? So we started to dig into the only thing that had changed in his life, and that was the addition of Zoloft. Woody and I never questioned the drug. Why would we? Zoloft was is FDA approved, given by his doctor. It was advertised and sold as safe and as effective. Ironically, the day that Woody was found, the front page of our local paper had an article that said the UK finds link between antidepressants and suicide in teens. So that started our journey. Our journey for the truth has taken us to the FDA, Congress, the courts, and the media. Unfortunately, I quickly learned that Woody was not an isolated case, or anecdotal, as the FDA liked to refer us. I find this ironic since the FDA had a hearing in 1991 when it was just Prozac, 13 years before the first black box warning came on before kids, and all the other drugs that came after Prozac. In the battle for Woody, we were able to get confidential internal Pfizer and other drug company documents made public that showed that they knew of the risk of suicide, violence, and not to speak of the questionable efficacy, but failed to tell the public. I hand-delivered these documents to the FDA, members of Congress, and the media. I can't believe it's been 12 years since Woody's death, and we're still having this debate. In some ways, I think the situation's gotten worse. Where's the public outrage? It seems everywhere you turn, there's something about mental health in the headlines, whether it's another mass shooting, a high-profile suicide like Robin Williams, or a kid who has difficulty focusing in school. The conversation never is about the drugs. It quickly turns into the need for more mental health services, more screenings, more treatments to address these issues. But what if less is actually more? The public has been convinced through drug company marketing, psychiatry, and the medical establishments that mental illness is a biologically based condition. Everyday life distresses and problems are being sold as undiagnosed mental disorders, caused by a chemical imbalance requiring a pill solution. Oftentimes, as we've heard, without full disclosure of the dangerous side effects. There are a lot of powerful self-interests at play in this current model of medicalizing life stresses. We have Big Pharma, we have the American Psychiatric Association, and various patient advocacy groups, such as the National Alliance for Mentally Ill. They all have something to gain. Drug companies are highly motivated to spend billions of dollars selling illnesses to push their pill treatments. The media is there to protect their ad dollars. The APA and psychiatry want to protect their role as being the trusted medical institution that really understands psychiatric care. Meanwhile, 70 to 80% of these drugs are being written by GPs, and often after a 5-minute visit. In today's world, mentally ill is such a vague and general term that it lacks any real meaning. The APA's DSM has set up such broad definitions of what a psychiatric disorder is that 1 in 4 Americans are said to suffer from some kind of mental illness, and that undesired behaviors, grief, sadness, ADHD, substance abuse, they all get classified as mental illnesses. There's got to be a better way. For starters, I'd like the conversation to change from mental health to mental well-being. Mental health implies a sickness model. The current narrative of the medical model is that untreated mental illness threatens the safety, the security, and health of the general public. Therefore, we need more treatments. I feel passionately that something needs to be done. I don't want to get another email like I did yesterday from a 49-year-old, or from a guy whose 49-year-old father-in-law shot himself on Saturday after being given Zoloft from his doctor because he was feeling a little down because him and his wife were splitting up. We got to do better for Woody, for Candace, for Stuart, for Shane, and for Jake. We need to empower the public to challenge the current mental health system to ask, what if less is actually more? But we've got to first start the debate in a public forum. So thank you, Peter, for giving us this opportunity, and thank you for listening to all of our stories. Thanks.
It is difficult to say anything after this. In fact, we should have silence. It is so overwhelming to hear your stories. There are more people in this audience who have similar stories. One of them, living here in Denmark, his son hanged himself in a shipyard crane. He didn't have a psychiatric disorder, just like your stories. And there are other people as well. I have written about 8 of these people in my book, and I have photos of those who died, which my publisher didn't really understand. It will make the book more expensive to have color photos. And I said, well, that can't be much, and I want these photos. And now I will ask you about something. My book was reviewed in the Danish Medical Journal 2 days ago. Whom did the editors ask to review my book about psychiatry? You will have one guess. The chairman of the Danish Psychiatric Association. So what do you think the book review looks like? I have submitted a comment on the book review where I say that there are, I think, 5 untruthful statements about my book and about my person. Not only that, he was dissatisfied that a scientist like me couldn't stick to the science. Why I also told human stories and played on feelings. Okay? So these deaths are now playing on feelings. And I actually wrote in the book, why do I do this? Because you want me to tell your stories to help others not ending up in the same tragedy. And because 1,000 deaths is just a number, just a statistic, but when you put faces on death, you start paying notice. So I cannot thank you enough for this. It was very moving and I just don't know what to say. But now we will have questions. And it can be about almost anything. So if you 5 will come up here so you can answer questions.
Can I in the meantime ask how many people have lost someone to psychiatry?
Well, do you mean who died?
Yes, who died?
Oh, those I know survived, so they were lucky.
Yes, so you know whom you know.
That's about 20 people. I think 25 perhaps, I don't know.
That is despicable.
One of you mentioned NAMI, the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill in United States, which is a relative organization, which it turns out gets a large pot of its money to run from the pharmaceutical industry. And when I was in my despair, part of starting a parent organization here in Norway in 1995, I didn't know how this corrupted system works. And the first thing that happened was that Pfizer offered us money. And some of the relatives wanted the money to run the organization. We started fighting it because we felt that would corrupt or endanger us in some way. That danger is still in any family parent organization that doesn't read up on the literature and listen to people like you and Peter and Robert. So I must say thank you very much for sharing your terrible stories. I lost my son, he was 28, and what they said when he was dead, all of a sudden, I got a call from a Norwegian doctor, and he said something I didn't really understand till it had sunk deep inside me. He said, maybe it was for the best. And if I hadn't read the history of the Second World War and what German doctors and German psychiatrists let themselves be used to do, I wouldn't have understood that attitude. But that attitude is still with us, and we have to fight it. Thank you.
Thank you for your stories. I would say this is not, what I will suggest is not a solution to the problem, but when I go to Norway every year to something called Amalie Days, Amalie Skram was an author which already in 1890 was very critical about psychiatry. She was buried here in Denmark, but she was dug up and put on the graves for the unknown. But in Norway, they have a very good tradition, because on they have a grave which is called the shame grave of the shame, and every year people, parents of people with mental health problems and so on, and youth organizations, we come there every year to talk about the victims of psychiatry. And then there's a mass in the church for those who want to go in there, where the priests also speak about the victims of psychiatry. We should have something like this in Denmark also, just to make it visible, but also to have a place to share our grief. And maybe we should demand the politicians to say, we need a year, one day, which is holy, for where we can praise all the victims of psychiatry.
This is not a question. I would like to say that we will have a film festival in Gothenburg, 16 to 18 October, which will present the different images, alternative stories than what is presented within the traditional psychiatry, where we have invited speakers, 27 different speakers, movies from a lot of countries. If those of you who are here have a possibility to come, it would mean a lot.
Can you tell us what it is called so that people can Google it?
Yeah, the name of the film festival is Driving Us Crazy.
Driving Us Crazy?
Yes.
Okay.
And many people being here today will be there also to present both movies and their own lived experience and research. So have a look, please, and search for it at the website. You are very welcome.
Thank you.
I almost feel like we should have candles and we could go and light up a candle. This is what we do in our organization that we have started, Death in Psychiatry. Once a year, we honor the dead.
I was incredibly moved by these tales of woe, and but what I think is needed is something that hasn't happened, which is a debate on the evidence that was presented to, so to speak, draw out the psychiatrists that are being that are the objects and the subjects here. And you referred to that text, the review of your book in our Medical Association journal, which I also read, of course. And I think there's a need for a scientific or academic discussion of the evidence. It is a more effective way of moving on, I think, because with the incalcitrance of the psychiatrists, I think speaking in each part, so to speak, of the forum and never listening directly and answering questions and commenting on the evidence. Without doing that, I think it'll be a much more difficult task to move on, because some of these affairs here will be taken as things that remind some psychiatrists of cult activities or whatever, and I think we need to move beyond that. And I think it is possible to have this academic discussion where this evidence is presented and debated, and I think that is needed, because and that's why I think incorrectly he referred to he commented on the feelings, but I think he's never going to be swayed by the feelings, because he has probably heard of tales of woe in many cases. So it is the discussion of the evidence that is going to help advance this cause.
Let me reply to that. And as usual, your comments are very, very useful. So I thank you for them. The evidence is rather crystal clear as far as I can see. But you can't talk to people who refuse to listen. And this is exactly what mainstream silverback psychiatry is about. They have given up listening. They won't listen. They live in a fantasy world, which I call it. And Lundbeck's former director said on the radio that antidepressants protect children against suicide. It's directly against the evidence. And some psychiatric professors in Denmark even claim something similar, that it hasn't been shown that these drugs are dangerous. It's only suicidal behavior, not completed suicide, they say, repeatedly. So are we supposed to believe there is no relation between wanting to commit suicide, preparing for a suicide, and then the actual suicide is a completely different animal? This is so ridiculous, and it makes me angry. So, Albert, you can't talk to these people. That's why I've given up on them. They will never change. And whether I talk science to them or feelings to them, some of them don't have any empathy. Not the slightest bit. They should never have become psychiatrists in the first place. Peter. This is very clear. So, I'm up against an overwhelming power, the drug industry, the wealthiest and most criminal industry in the world, and a lot of corrupt psychiatrists. I'm up against that, but I'm fortunately not alone. So what I'm doing is I'm counting on the science. I don't feel they can beat me there. They have tried, but they haven't succeeded. And if I want to, I will also tell about personal stories, because they are incredibly important. And these stories that we have heard today, in all cases like these forensic studies from Australia, there was no good indication for using an antidepressant. Not at all. These people acted in an out-of-character fashion, often associated with akathisia, that is very well documented. This predisposes to suicide and homicide. So people might call your losses anecdotes, as you said, Kim. These are not anecdotes. Already in 1999, there were more than 2,000 reports of suicides on fluoxetine to the Food and Drug Administration. In 1999, more than 2,000. I cannot say that fluoxetine killed all of them, but they definitely did kill some of them.
With all due respect to your comment that you made, firstly, I wish it was just a tale of woe. My son isn't a tale. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a tale of woe. It's fact. My 14-year-old child is not coming back. Now, let me be very, very clear on something. We had a non-diagnosed, non-depression, non-suicidal. The only thing that changed in my child's life was 46 days of Prozac. Now, what I forgot to mention, but thankfully I've got this opportunity again, was that Jake was brought back to the psychiatrist. And when I told her, he had a meltdown. He walked out of an exam. He had diarrhea. He was waking up early. He was finding it difficult to sleep. What I was actually told was, that will wear off in 3 to 4 weeks. Stay with the meds. So you have said you're a psychiatrist. Am I correct on that? No. Okay, right. You seem to be pro-psychiatry today.
Let me just tell you, Albert is a neuroscientist, and a very good one. And I have a lot of respect for him, and I am very pleased about the questions you have. So
that's fine, Peter, but I'm a mammy, and I'm a very good one too.
Yes.
Okay.
While you attempt to minimize us by calling us tales of woe, as Kim had said, we are not anecdotes. These are real-life situations. I want you to know from a psychiatric point of view, Dr. Joseph Glenn Mullen, who was chair of the psychiatry department at Harvard, wrote a 114-page paper on my daughter, complete with all the scientific facts you could want to support that what I'm telling you is true. And for you to minimize that is very disturbing to me. Very disturbing.
I didn't do that.
No, I am not a tale of woe. I am an angry mother who is here to support you.
I mean, I actually like when we get other points of view, because I think we're always talking to ourselves. So the one thing that we had done with, we put on a conference called Selling Sickness, and we brought all these different peoples together, and one of them was lawyers. And so it's really hard, having the debate. I mean, I have debates all the time with like GPs, because that's really my thing, is that GPs are handing it out, but they just buy the psychiatry and the science. But once you actually see documents and it's in their own, it's Pfizer's letterhead, it's talking about the clinical studies that they buried, and that when you start seeing it black and white, and then you put all of our stories that are real life stories, and then you put science, it actually starts to tell a bigger picture. So I actually would I wish that we would get people, psychiatrists here, that would actually start to listen to what we're having to say. So.
You said that you wanted the evidence to be discussed. Well, it was discussed. It was discussed at Shane's inquest. We had a psychopharmacologist, David Healy. We also had the assistant state pathologist who said he felt that SSRIs were causing people to kill themselves. He said of the last 5 autopsies he did, 4 were recently introduced to SSRIs, and he asked people in Ireland to do something about it. But Irish psychiatry decided not to. But the evidence was discussed.
I am a huge supporter of the medical profession. Most of my friends are doctors, and inevitably, here's my feelings. Yes, there are doctors who don't follow good practice, just like social workers and lawyers. What I think is the biggest tragedy is most doctors are visited by a really, really cute drug rep who has a really cute body and really pretty. And they sometimes bring meals, though the meals have had to be eliminated. And a lot of doctors are getting free prescription samples, and they're being told what the side effects are based on what a drug rep is giving them. And so where I am very supportive of the medical profession, and like I know there's problems with all of them, I think that we just have to get more active. I would love somebody anywhere in the world to support legitimate drug trials where independent scientists who are not funded by government, by FDA, or not funded by Big Pharma, would look at Paxil and say, gee, what really happens during the early stages? I think that would be a wonderful way to fund, and it's an impossible situation. So I really believe in the doctors are just not being informed. And, they're only as good as the information that they're getting. So I welcome the discussions on that as well. Thank you.
My name is Anders Tingman. I'm a psychologist, and I want to have a question related to the last of the speakers from Minnesota. You said that you actually want to go from mental health to mental well-being, and I think that we should think about this also about the term treatment, as Peter uses. As there was a discussion about should we use pills for treatment, or should we use psychological treatment? But I think we should be wary of using this term of treatment, because just like mental health, I think treatment, as it is understood as like a technical treatment for a specific disease, it is also like a reduction of the field here. So actually, I think the root problem is that we as a society have handed over the power to people who are educated in medicine to define what this field is all about. So therefore they uses the medical vocabulary. They force it on all these kind of phenomena, grief and all kinds of problems. So I think it's not just about treatment. I think more like in open dialogue and stuff, they use a much broader intervention to help people reintegrate in life, and treatment is just one of
Yeah, could I suggest one thing?
Yeah.
Let's call it interventions and not treatments.
Sure, but
That might-
my question is, what do we do about this thing that we have historically handed down the power to the medical profession to define what this problem is about? Because then, how do we take it back, or how do we take it out of the hands of?
Well, yes, psychiatric patients should take back their lives. They are responsible for their lives, not their psychiatrists. That's the first thing. And we as professionals should realize that biological psychiatry has by and large been a disaster. We need to get away from that.
I find this here very much broad. I think that we have made a society where we cannot be ill and we are going to have a pill. I'm really moved to hear that everybody in your family get pill for not really big things, but small things. And I think in this year I have seen so many well-educated people go into a kind of antidepressive and get breaks down. My thing is that we also have to look at the way we build up, so we give space for all the medicine.
I'm Carsten Jorgensen, and I'm also from the Nordic Cochrane Centre. I haven't been working with Peter on psychiatry, but many other topics for the past 10 years. But as a coincidence, I was involved in a national clinical guideline for a National Board of Health on ADHD treatment for adults. And I think this is perhaps to end this session on a more optimistic note, is that these new guidelines are evidence-based, so the psychiatrists were forced to actually look at the primary studies. And fortunately, the psychiatrists turned out to not be more stupid than the rest of us. They could recognize a pile of poo when they saw it. So these studies by Dr. Biedermann that were highlighted early on in the session were a prominent part of the studies on methylphenidate here, and they were very poorly done. They recognized this, so we arrived at a weak recommendation of this drug, which essentially means that you have to try something before you try the drugs. So I'm often asked what evidence-based medicine can be used for, and I think this is actually a good example.
Thank you, Janus Bang, Danish television. I'll ask a very quick question to Peter. I read your book last week. I'm also a scholar in science from Southern Danish University. I want to ask you this simple question. You use science as argument in your book, is this correct?
Of course.
Thank you.
That was a really funny question. What else should I do? Well, okay, it's time for coffee, but...
That was a soundbite for a movie or something.